So next we will compare the athlete, the initial high power athlete, to a different trial by the same athlete. So we'll right click on the graph and close that comparison trial and open a new comparison trial. In this case, it's a second counter movement jump from the same athlete. We'll just zoom in on the actual jump here and just use the buttons to shift the trials so that they align in time. So here we have two trials aligned based on the takeoff time point here, and this is an excellent way to compare two trials within an athlete, in the same athlete in this case. And we can see that the athlete's very consistent. They're producing very similar force profiles, perhaps a slightly greater eccentric dip here, but very, very similar between these two trials. And this is very useful comparing an athlete over time. For example, the impact of training and how this would shift their various kinetic and kinematic graph profiles. Also to compare the athlete at baseline, then post-injury, and then during the course of rehabilitation, to be able to compare this athlete and track them over time, examining the changes in their jump profiles. Again, we can separate out the left and right limbs in this case, and we can see we can then make a direct comparison, particularly if it is perhaps an example, an injury to the left or right leg. We can then compare directly the force output from each leg over time. Just looking at the right here, quite similar. Looking at the left, again quite similar, but this is an injury-free athlete who is quite healthy and at the moment highly trained. So no asymmetries there, and no difference between these two trials. So we'll go back to display the force here, the overall total force here, and then let's have a look at some other measures of comparison. For velocity here, we can see very, very similar, perhaps a slightly greater eccentric velocity for the second trial here, but the almost identical peak velocity produced here. If we then compare the power outputs, again, we see very, very close correspondence between these two trials in this same athlete here. Slightly more negative in terms of the power absorption here, but really no significant difference. And then we see perhaps slightly higher power here for the first trial compared to the comparison trial. So as you can see, using this graph analysis, we have a very powerful way to compare different athletes, or to compare the same athlete over time, to track the effects of training or rehabilitation or comparison between pre and post-injury performance.